Someone stealing your credit card details can't do anything with it in India. Since 2021, people have complained that they've been defrauded up to 10,300 crores. They are putting a psychological pressure, pretending to be someone they're not. Like you said, it's an improbable promise, right? I'll double your money, I'll give you 30% in a week. If you're getting double-digit returns post-tax, you're doing very well. If you don't pay it today, right, we'll freeze your bank account. This is not an individual fight. This is a national fight against cybercrime.
How many stories have you heard recently about people falling victim to fraud? Just the other day, there was a report about some 22-year-old and his friends that had stolen 2,200 crore rupees from various people through an application that promised eye-watering returns. It ended up being a Ponzi scheme. And I can guess what you're probably thinking. I would never fall for something like that. But the thing is, fraudsters are not using the same script, and it's getting easier to fall into a trap. This episode of Big Decision aims to help you protect yourself and your loved ones. Joining me to talk about the safeguards that you should put in place and perhaps more importantly, what you should do if you fall victim to a crime is Adhil Shetty, co-founder of Bank Bazaar. Adhil, thanks so much for taking the time.
It's top of mind, Alex. All our bank partners, digital consumers, regulator, everyone realizes that we need to educate consumers, we need to give them the tools to fight back against cyber fraud. This is now a national agenda. It's very important you're discussing this.
Now, let's put a bit of a scale to this because there must be some numbers. Obviously, it's hard to quantify and there are probably complaints every day. But is there a way to measure how large this problem is?
Yes, we have something called the National Cybercrime Reporting Portal, NCRP. NCRP says that since 2021, people have complained that they've been defrauded up to 10,300 crores in cyber fraud, right? And NCRP says that today it receives up to 67,000 calls per day.
67,000 per day?
Yeah, so these calls could be pertaining to multiple types of issues, but clearly, right, there is something we need to take cognizance of. The good news is NCRP also says that because of timely reporting, they've been able to save about 2,300 crores once people have reported the cybercrime in timely fashion.
So 20% has been recovered so far. Hopefully, we get better, or our organizations and institutions get better at preventing this and also clawing back money that is lost. We will talk about what you should do in such a situation, but I think what would help at the start, Adhil, is to identify how perpetrators or fraudsters are doing what they're doing. And there are various ways in which it can be done right now. So let's first briefly talk about the various ways in which fraudsters operate.
Sure, Alex. So let's talk about 3 common ways fraudsters operate, right? And let's start with phishing. And phishing is, I'd say, the largest problem that we need to discuss. So we have a person who's got a call from their electricity provider saying you're overdue, your electricity is going to be cut today. I'll send you a link and make this payment, right? And it's completely phishing. There's no
two ways about it. Yeah.
There's no 2 ways about it. Or it could be that a colleague of mine got an email saying, hey, this is Adhil, and sender name said Adhil Shetty. Please transfer so much money to me at this phone number. I need it urgently. But essentially, it's phishing in the sense that they are putting a psychological pressure, pretending to be someone they're not, saying, please give me the money quickly because it's urgent, right? The second kind is something which is called card skimming, wherein while you use your credit card or your debit card at a certain outlet, those details are being recorded, and these details will be used again and your PIN is being noted, right? So you need to watch out that there's no extra machine or reader on top of where you're paying your bill.
At a POS machine.
At a POS machine, or it could be a SIM cloning, which is again quite sophisticated, but someone is reading your SMSs and then operating on your behalf. But let's put card skimming and SIM cloning as a second item. The third is, right, just credentials theft. So you shopped online somewhere, and those credit card details somehow made their way to a fraudster who's now using it internationally. Because I think the RBI has done a fabulous job in India, wherein without an OTP or your PIN,
two-factor authentication.
Two-factor authentication, and it's so good, right, that the RBI put that in place. Someone stealing your credit card details can't do anything with it in India, but they could go to an international site and shop for all kinds of things, and without OTP or PIN, use it in an international site. So you've got to watch out and keep track of your transaction updates to make sure that's not happening to you.
And there's also the Ponzi scheme that I mentioned at the start, and the way that happens is really, it's been happening for years together, but funnily enough, the one factor that does not change is the incitement of greed and the promise of returns, where you're promised, and in this case that I was talking about, through a mobile application, which said, we'll give you 30 plus returns, or we'll give you 60 plus returns. You put a few thousand rupees and they give it back to you in a week's time with that kind of a return. So you're incentivized, or you feel like you can put a much larger amount, that you should put such a much larger amount, or you'd be losing out on the opportunity of a lifetime, and then they never come back.
Yeah, it operates on greed, Alex, right? Like you said, it's an improbable promise, right? I'll double your money, I'll give you 30% in a week. And they can do it maybe once as part of the fraud scheme, or twice, but then you get sucked in deeper and deeper, and before you know it, you're in the deep end. So that's why we feel, right, if you can stay away from that greed, just trust something like a Sensex or a Nifty index. And if you're making double-digit returns post-tax, it's genuinely a good return.
Yeah.
And over 10 years, you're going to build that nest egg, or that saving you need for your daughter's education.
Or whatever else you need it for, but I think people have gotten spoiled somewhat, Adil, by the outperformance of the Indian equity markets over the last 3 years. You've had multi-baggers by the dozen, in fact, by the double dozen, if you can call it that. And 100% returns are par for the course. So I think to a certain extent, people need to understand that 15% is a great return.
Absolutely.
Pre-tax in equity. Single-digit return is par for the course for fixed income. You should not be getting much more than that, because if you are, then it's a bit of a concern.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. When I've asked for the same advice from the heads of mutual fund companies, right, they say the same thing. If you're getting double-digit returns post-tax, you're doing very well. Don't let greed, right, pull you down a path wherein you're operating with a fraudster or a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah. 20+% returns, let's call it that. 20+% returns are outliers, and you're unlikely to get that very often. Just to put things simply, so if someone's promising you 20+% returns, at least pay very close attention to who they are and how they claim that they're going to do this. Ask a few questions. What are you going to be investing in? Which company is this? What does the company do? And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But let's talk about phishing, because this is something in which there is a fear that is created. And the reason I know that it's very simple to fall for something like this is that there are stories very close to home where people who should know better have fallen prey to this. And when I talk to them later, they say, I don't know what went through my mind, but it just was one thing after the other, and it just happened. How does phishing occur, and how is it so easy to fall for it?
So it's basically a psychological attack, right? And they're creating a sense of haste, a sense that you need to do something now. So in the Secure Payments, a guide to transacting online, which Bank Bazaar has put out, customer talks about the utility company. So the utility company example is, you've not paid your bill, we're going to cut your electricity, I'm sending you a link, make the payment, right? It's a psychological attack. What happened with a colleague of mine is they said, I'm calling from a bank. You have 1 lakh outstanding on your credit card. If you don't pay it today, right, we'll freeze your bank account. But the person was smart enough to know that, a bank won't call you with those kinds of threats, and neither will a regulator. And he contacted the bank himself, at which point in time he found out that it was a fraud. Or a case, right, where someone says that I'll send you a UPI link, this is your friend or your boss, and things are not okay, please transfer the money immediately. We need a...
Yeah, there's one more. In fact, I heard the other day that somebody called saying, I'm transferring money for your father. I'm sending it to you. I can't send it to him, so I'm sending it to you. And you get the message on your phone, but it turns out that it's actually not that money. And it so happens that they say, I've transferred too much. Can you send it back? And they call you back immediately. So you've just glanced through it and you don't know that it's actually not from your bank.
Yeah, absolutely. So the message says that 10,000 rupees has hit your bank account, but it's actually not from the bank. It's from this fraudster who then says, oh, I gave you too much, give it back.
And
so
they call you and they keep you on the phone and they don't allow you to really glance at the screen. And in that moment, you think, oh yeah, you know what, maybe I should just send this back.
Yeah, that's the psychological attack that happens. So at this point in time, what needs to be done is you need to slow down and you need to apply what we call a check, CHECK framework. And I'll quickly summarize, how we've advised consumers at Bank Bazaar. So the first one, right, is just the credibility of the person asking you the money, right? The number one thing, Alex, is call the person who says they need it urgently. It might be a bank, it might be your father. Just pick up the phone and say, did you send me a message saying I have to transfer money urgently? Or are you the bank which is trying to contact me? So check the credibility, right? Second, be careful if it's hasty. Whenever someone says it's a 2-hour deadline, if you don't do it today, we'll do something, that haste is part of the psychological attack, right? E is extra information. Why do you need my OTP? Why do you need my card number? Why do you need my PIN? Just check if they're putting that excess information pressure on you. C, right, is this a credible portal? Did you go to your bank site? Did you go to the utility site? Is it a known provider who's asking you for this information? And controlled, right? Did you initiate it? Or is it coming at you? Because if you initiate a payment, it's fine. But if it's someone coming at you with haste, with extra information, the alarm bell should go off. So I think we really need to create that awareness, which your show is doing now, that when someone puts pressure, when someone says it's urgent, when it's initiated by them, not by you, when they're sending you a link to something that is not a portal you usually pay with, it's not your bank site that you're on, it's not the utility site you're on, all this, right, should make you pause and reconsider.
It's interesting because the regulator is doing a lot. Banks have started taking action. Just the other day, last week, Adhil, I was trying to transfer money to my dad, and I couldn't remember how much I had to send to him. And I called him. It was on speaker. I went to the bank application, and while I was punching in the amount to send, and as I was hitting send, there was a pop-up to say, "Is this somebody that you trust?" I cannot remember the exact the text that was used, but is this someone that you trust? You are on a phone call, perhaps you should send it later or something like that.
Yeah.
So banks are taking cognizance of
it. See, kudos, right? I think the example is from ICICI Bank, and kudos to them of thinking of this kind of application, saying if you're on a call and you're transferring money, they're saying, are you sure?
Yeah.
See, Alex, nowhere in the world, right, has the banking regulator, in our case RBI, hired one of the biggest superstars in the country to create awareness material saying don't share your OTP, don't share your CVV, don't share your PIN. I think they're doing their job there. In fact, I would say the design of India's systems are actually quite secure. Two-factor authentication. How many years ago, right, the RBI pushed and the bank supported and we made it happen. There's several developed nations which don't offer two-factor authentication. Now, the problem is psychological. So if I don't give you my PIN, if I don't give you my OTP, there's very little you can do about it. So we've come to a point in time, right, where we need to create that awareness that the phishing attack is happening, and consumers need to take a pause, right, when the alarm bells of this is initiated by someone else. I don't know who they are. They're putting pressure on me saying, do it now. They're asking for my OTP. They're asking for my CVV. They're sending me a link for payment now, which typically they will not do. That needs to give pause to our consumers.
And the best way to, as you pointed out, the best way to fix this or to prevent something from happening is to actually call the utility that they're talking about. Say, I'll call you back.
That's the best way, Alex, right? So when my colleague got a message saying, this is Adhil, I urgently need you to transfer this much money here, she just called me, right? And said, Adhil, are you in trouble? And I said, no. If you get a message from your friend, I think number one, call, right?
Yeah.
Which is that credibility of who it is, which is the C in the check framework. The second I find, right, is pay in the site that you know the money is due. So go to your bank site and check and make the payment. Go to your utility site, check and make that payment. Don't do it on a link that you got. Don't do it on a request that you got. Just go to the credible site, right? Have the control that you've gone to the credible site. This is a known platform, and then make the payment on the known platform with your control, which is the K in the check framework.
Absolutely. You know, we've spoken about a lot of the ways in which these frauds are perpetrated, and we've also talked about what you should do to prevent such a situation from occurring. But the reality is, and I said it earlier, a lot of stories very close to home, this happens more often than not. There are a few things that you can do immediately, and there are steps that have been put in place. You mentioned agencies that are government sponsored that are working towards recovery. But there is a golden window, as they call it. What is the first thing that you do, Adhil?
Yeah. So, Alex, there are actually three things you need to do, but I'll cycle through them and then we'll discuss them. And it's so important you're talking about this to consumers, right? Because a lot of times people fall victim. So let's assume you fall in victim. Yeah. Now what do you do, right? So firstly, right, RBI has created a golden window of zero liability, wherein if you complain to your bank that this fraudulent payment has happened and you've not made any clear mistake. So for example, the OTP has not been used for the transaction, the secret PIN has not been used.
Has not been shared.
Has not been shared. You've not given these card details to your spouse or your child, who's then subsequently used them. So provided you've not made any error and no PIN has been used, no OTP has been used, right? You have a 3-day golden window, which is called the zero liability window. And this is done by reporting it immediately to your bank. And then there's a dispute form that you need to file with all the proof that when you reported, the fact that you've not used your card for this and so on and so forth. But the important thing over here, right, is it needs to be established that the secret OTP was not utilized, the secret PIN was not utilized.
How many instances can you think of where such a situation can arise?
So see, with international transactions that can happen.
Sure.
With a domestic transaction, it's not possible because there's a two-factor authentication. So unless someone has had access to your mobile phone. See, what sometimes happens is people will let the OTP go to their mobile and to an email, and that email will be managed by someone else.
Sure.
So I think you just need to prove in that golden window 3-day period that you've not used the OTP and you've not used the PIN, secret PIN.
Yeah.
Between 3 and 7 days, 4 and 7 days, the liability increases. So you might have a 10,000 rupee liability, and after 7 days, it's the bank policy. So this is number one.
But just to follow up on that, in that situation, does the bank bear the liability, or do you wait for that money to be clawed back for you to get paid? That's what I want to know.
So it's a case-by-case situation, Alex, because see, if the transaction has happened abroad, no OTP has been used, no PIN has been used, right? Then you are protected under the zero liability window. As long as you can prove, right, that you've not made any negligent error, you have what is called the zero liability protection up to 3 days, which the RBI has provided. But like I said, every case is different. Because like I said, the OTP happened to be going to an email, that email is with someone else, you're not using it. So all these nitty-gritties needs to be looked into. So this is one where the money is moved out of your account and you're disputing it.
That was the first one. There are other ways in which you can, of course, react, and you must, in fact, do a few things very importantly.
Yeah, so the second one is the National Cybercrime Reporting Portal, NCRP. So here's wherein the Ministry of Home Affairs has set up this portal. They're coordinating with all the banks, they're coordinating with all the payment apps, the payment gateways, and they will see if they can block the money moving from bank to bank and eventually to the fraudster. So you should immediately file a complaint with the NCRP. They have a website, you can go there, you can file a complaint, they have a phone number. And they will try and see, right, if they can block the money going through the entire system.
This is what you had said at the start about calls being made, the 67,000 calls?
Yes, so they had put out some press recently saying, they get calls for a lot of things, but in total they're getting 67,000 calls a day on various issues and inquiries that people have, right? And they're the people who've also said that they've stopped 2,300 crores of fraudulent money by putting in checks. There's a very interesting news item wherein a techie in Hyderabad had transferred several lakhs to a fraudster, and immediately he alerted the NCRP. And the police who was managing the NCRP, because of the quick coordination between various banks and payment gateways, were able to stop that money reaching the fraudster's account.
Because it normally moves from the account to which it's been transferred to several other accounts very, very quickly before it
that's the chain that they're trying to control, right?
And they're breaking that.
And I think it's good that the Ministry of Home Affairs has put this up. All the banks are coordinating, all the payment apps are coordinating, all the payment gateways are coordinating. So this is to try and stop the flow before it reaches the final fraudster's destination.
Okay. I've heard that there needs to be several follow-ups with the crime branch, for example. And there are two terms where I've seen it's disputed, where a particular transaction is disputed and a particular transaction is blocked in statements that you've seen with the crime branch. So there'll be details of these transactions that have been provided by the bank. There is a tag of disputed and there is a tag of blocked. How do you understand this terminology and what do you do in such a situation?
Right. So the third thing you have to do is file an FIR and file a complaint with the cybercrime unit. So this complaint is useful as part of the dispute, and sometimes you're asked for proof of that, and also you want this investigated, right? Saying, is this an organized ring? What can the police and the cybercrime unit do to follow up and bust it? Which is different from, blocking the payment or getting the zero liability window, that golden window that the RBI offers you. So typically what happens, right, is when you file a complaint with the bank, the first status that goes in is that this is a disputed status, which says that you've called, you've complained, it's been placed in a dispute, and now it's being followed up and resolved, right? So the first question is, has the money been paid out to the end recipient?
Right.
Because if it can be blocked, then the money is not gone through and it's safe. But if the money has been paid out to the final recipient, now we need to say, what was the proof offered, where was this initiated, and an investigation and resolution needs to happen. So typically, right, a bank will have several statuses. First, it'll say dispute. Then if it's resolved in your favor, it'll say resolved, or it'll say blocked, or it'll say reversed, right? So there's a status wherein the bank will say it's disputed. So I'm not putting this in your dues for the month, but it's still in a dispute status. So you need to keep track of it until it's 100% resolved.
But with whom? Do you go to the crime branch? Or if for example, you missed this golden window, or if you do not fall under the ambit of this golden window, which most people would not, because you probably shared some information that you shouldn't have. And so in that situation, your only recourse is to go through the police or go through your bank. So in that situation, how do you follow up? Who do you follow up with? Do you contract a lawyer? Do they help you out with legal proceedings?
So, see, today people are aware of their transactions. So I think hitting the golden window, like you said, is not a problem, because I get an SMS saying so much has been deducted. And this again is an innovation in India. In a lot of countries, right, every transaction you don't get an SMS at that time saying a payment has been made, saying if there's a problem, call this number to file a complaint or to dispute it. So people are aware. But like you said, if an OTP has been used, if a PIN has been used, then you might not fall under the zero liability window. See, one could use a lawyer, or one would need to follow up themselves, right? Either with the cybercrime unit or with the NCRP. And I think we're in this process where more and more is getting automated, Alex. I think everyone realizes this is a very important national initiative. So maybe today you have to call and follow up, but I'm sure very soon, right, a lot of this cybercrime tracking, a lot of this status of dispute being available on time, I think a lot of it will start becoming available online. But yes, some amount of follow-up might be required now.
Okay. In your opinion, does popular culture come into play here? Because I've heard of certain areas becoming hubs somewhat of the perpetration of such crime. Is that true?
There's some very initial small data set reports out there. So Kolkata police had analyzed a set of cybercrime FIRs that they had. There was some data put out by a startup which was at a very, very reputed institution which did a similar analysis. And they seem to be indicating that there are certain areas which are just outside urban areas where the cybercrime strength or the prevention and tracking and shutting down these people is not very large right now. And these districts like Jamtara and a few more districts were mentioned, right? Like, for example, a Mathura, an Alwar, a Gurugram, that there are these fishers or attackers who are operating from these areas. But keep in mind, Alex, there's no reason why it couldn't be from anywhere. So you're not protecting yourself because the psychological attack saying, I'm going to disconnect your electricity, or I'm going to freeze your bank account, or I'm calling from a regulator and I'm going to take this action against you. It could happen from anywhere. My wife got a call saying I'm calling from a police station in a large Indian state and there's an FIR, and unless you make this payment, right, we're going to have to take this action against you. It could happen from anywhere.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought. Adhil, I hope that we've broken down the various ways in which this is done, and the best way to guard against this is to know how it's done in the first place, and hopefully that battle has been won before it has to be fought. But having said that, if it does happen, we've also discussed ways in which you can hopefully find a resolution.
Yeah, Alex, this is a national fight. This is not an individual fight. This is a national fight against cybercrime, right, and cyber fraud. I think the Reserve Bank of India has been talking about it. TRAI has been talking about it. The Ministry of Home Affairs is talking about it. I think it's so important that given our systems are strong, it's a completely different situation in countries where they don't have two-factor authentication, where they don't have SMSs informing you within minutes of every transaction. Yeah. Our systems are good, Alex. All these attacks, right, a bulk of these attacks are psychological attack. And a psychological attack, right, no system can prevent. There's no way the government or the RBI can do more. I think now it comes to educating consumers, and it's really important you're doing this now, right? Check, is it a credible source? Can you contact them and verify? If they're putting pressure on you on haste, watch out. Excess information, if they want your PIN, if they want your OTP, something is going wrong here. Do you have control? Did you initiate it? Or is someone doing it to you? And is it a knowledgeable, known platform? Is it your bank site? Is it your credit card company site? Is it your utility site? This is all about psychology, Alex, and really, right, good that you're getting this information out to your consumers.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we've covered all of the bases. Thank you so much, Adhil, for joining in and for speaking to us on big decisions. And, well, that brings us to the end of this particular edition. Let us know what you think, and don't forget to share, because this episode, more than anything else, needs your help to create awareness. Do stay tuned. This is NDTV Profit.